Welcome to this week's Treasury Career Corner podcast, where I interview Treasury professionals about their Treasury careers. Each and every week, I talk to treasurers about how they've built their careers, where they are now, where they see both themselves and the Treasury profession going to next. And I want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Flywire. If you've ever wondered if there is a way as a Treasury professional to ease your international transaction flows, then these are the people to talk to. There's a link in the show notes to my interview with my good mate, Greg Levin, their Senior VP of Sales. Greg explains who Flywire are and how they can help you and your Treasury team with any of your cross-border payment headaches. The link to the interview is in the show notes, so check it out. And I also want to share some more exciting news. We have partnered with Eurofinance for their 33rd International Treasury Management Conference in Copenhagen, Denmark. It takes place from October 2nd to 4th, 2024. Looking forward to it. I've gone to the Eurofinance conferences now for over the past 20 years. If you're an international treasury professional, then it's the place to be. Not only because I'm going to be there, but you'll get to meet, as well as hopefully myself, over 2,200 senior treasury professionals from over 60 countries. You'll meet me. We can talk about on my upcoming special feature podcast about the current state of the global treasury recruitment market, live and in person from Copenhagen. And I'm looking forward to meeting many treasury folk, from clients such as Bose, eBay, Lego, FedEx. It's just going to be amazing. I hope you'll be there. Great opportunity to exchange experiences, meet leading financial and technology providers as well. It's going to be a great show. Now, our LinkedIn audience, I've already offered a 10% discount to, so you can get access to that. But you as a podcast listener, I have an even bigger surprise for you. Yes, included in today's episode and some of our future episodes, there is a secret extra discount code that will save you even more than the 10%. Just have to listen out for it, and you can save even more. Listen out for the code, have a pen ready, or you can just, bookmark it. Listen back to the podcast. Why wouldn't you want to listen to it twice? But anyway, if you listen out for it, you can save even more. To find out what it is and save even more, listen to today's episode. And I can't wait to see you in Copenhagen. And as I say each and every week, let's get on with the show. In this week's show, I'm joined by Stephanie Kusta, the Vice President and Treasurer at Orveon Global. Orveon Global is a collective of premium and prestige beauty brands committed to stark honesty, co-creation, and making a sustainable cultural impact. So their collective consists of the following leading clean beauty brands. So you've got Bare Minerals, Buxom, and Laura Mercier. What we're going to do is Stephanie will explain a little bit more about the group and how Treasury is set up there later on in the show. What we're going to do is go back to the beginning, how Stephanie discovered the world of finance into Treasury and all that great stuff from way back when. So Stephanie, over to you. Welcome to the show. And take us back to the beginning, if you would. Over to you.
Sure. Mike, thanks for having me. I appreciate that very much. Yeah, I think most of us have the same first line. I came into Treasury by accident, right? Nobody goes to, very few. I think it's actually, I've heard more students talking about wanting to learn about Treasury, but I think 20 some years ago, nobody went to school and thought about Treasury, and you're looking for a fairly entry-level finance job and you wind up in Treasury. And I think two things happen. You either fall in love and you're committed for life, or you think this isn't for me and you fall out early. I obviously was one of the former, where I fell in love right away, and it's been something I've been clinging to for 20 years.
So yeah. You started, and then, as you say, and I like that because you and I did this on the pre-show. So you fell in love with Treasury, but how did you discover finance and Treasury? Because you did your finance background, or again, for the listeners, because they might be doing the same. How did you then discover Treasury and finance?
Yeah. So for me, go back to college, trying to find yourself and find something that works for you. And I've always been a numbers person. So I just landed in finance, didn't really know what I was doing, and did a very short stint as a financial analyst on mutual funds, and did that for about a year, and it needed to move for personal reasons. And so I was looking for a job that didn't feel like it was straight entry level, but had a little bit more experience to it. But I also knew I was only 1 year out of school. And I found this assistant cash manager job at Electrolux. And at the time, Electrolux is a very large Swedish conglomerate, and their North American headquarters was in Cleveland, which was where I needed to move to. And it was just it seemed like a good fit. And it was really nice because it was this really great, Treasury is such a great way to learn a business, because if you're doing that job properly, you have to understand how everything flows, right? And so even if it's just your entry level and you're doing wire transfers, or you're doing the daily cash position, those are all things that you have to learn the business and understand the business to do well. And I liked that blend, especially early on in my career, of kind of routine and tasks and then projects on the side, right? And for me early on, I liked that mix of structure and project-based work. And I really enjoyed that.
And you say Electrolux, what was Electrolux like in Treasury terms? Because as you say, you were working for the North American side of the business, but
Yeah.
how was Treasury structured?
So we had a very large global treasury team. So at the time, and I don't know if they still do or not, they actually had their own trading desk in Sweden that had 5 to 10 people that were actually empowered to trade in the FX world, trade in commodities to make money for the organization. But then they had regional offices in Asia, Latin America, North America, and Europe. And we all worked together. There was a head of those regional groups. And so we had monthly calls at 7:30 in the morning where we all worked together and were cross-functional. And then I was fairly close with the headquarters as well. There's global cash management responsibilities out of Stockholm, but we were very well connected, and we even had our own IT staff. And so that's who I went to in Stockholm when I needed help with, at the time, our treasury workstation and things like that, because at the time things weren't on the cloud yet, right? Everything
Hmm.
was owned and on our systems. And so you had to have more local on staff to IT people. A lot of cross-functional work internally in Treasury in the different locations, but also eventually the CFO of North America was who was running Treasury. So a lot of interaction with the accounting team. And then eventually, as the head of the North America Treasury team, I was part of that leadership team in the Cleveland office. So that was very cool. I enjoyed that.
And then move on, Bayance, if you
Yeah.
say, who were they?
Yeah. So that was a spinoff from Goodyear. So the Carlisle team took a portion of the Goodyear business and spun it out into a standalone. So taking a company that was, oh my gosh, maybe 10-20% of the sales of Goodyear, but with the same global footprint. And so from there, I got to have global responsibility for cash management. I got to really start something, right? Got to take what I had learned at Electrolux, focused more on just cash management now, but getting that global responsibility and building it, which was very cool and very fun. But private equity is a different world. It's much more intense, especially from a cash perspective, right? That we were very highly levered. Half of our cash flow went to interest expense. And then I ended up being there during the financial crisis, and Lehman was the lead on our facility. So working through that and what that meant to our organization, and how the PE firm was going to help guide us through the structure that we needed to do to be successful. And it was hard, right? There were times where it was really hard. But I learned a lot. And I talk a lot about the treasurer there, who had these great staff meetings where everybody was talking about what they were doing. So even though I wasn't involved at the time in the FX hedging and some of the other things, and we also had M&A under Treasury, I was learning so much just by those staff meetings, by sitting and listening. And I also had that at Electrolux, where I learned a lot by being invited to meetings that I wouldn't necessarily, for my role, needed to be there. But I learned so much. And I really took that away from management style of how do you bring people into meetings, even though maybe their job doesn't require them to be there, but what are they learning and how are they growing just by sitting and absorbing the information that's being passed along?
And you worked Electrolux and then Bayance, rubber products and things, and then you made a shift to Chart Industries. And I wanted to get into that because you had a really great period of time there. So
Yeah.
you'd gone PLC, public company, then you'd gone to privately or PE backed and everything else. What was Chart like?
So
Who are Chart actually?
Chart was also public, and they hadn't really had traditional treasury person. They had tax running treasury, and it was much more transactional. And the company historically was mostly domestic, and they were getting ready to do acquisitions and become much more international. And so they really wanted to grow the treasury function. So they were looking for kind of their first real treasury manager. And so now I got this chance, right? At Advance, I was just cash management, but I was global. And now I got this chance to be this global treasury manager for the organization. And again, the treasurer didn't have a lot of treasury experience. He was also the head of M&A, but he was so great at being a sounding board and helping me grow. But because of this is why I bring up those meetings that I had with the treasurer at Vance, was because even though I wasn't doing the hedging and I wasn't doing some of the other work, I had sat in enough that I had learned enough that I felt like I could really be dangerous, and I could set up a hedging program, and I could work with some of the ops people to get all those things up and running. And I could really establish an international treasury organization that didn't really exist before, and makes that team not just the team that processed wire transfers, but really grow that team to be an organization that can add value to the organization through forecasting, through hedging, through as we went international, right? Getting all of those entities set up and running, looking at those capital structures. Do we do intercompany loans? Do we need to get local financing? What's the best long-term strategy in getting that money back, and really getting a chance? And that was super exciting. And I can't say enough about the people I worked for there, because they really gave me that chance to grow and shine.
And just with the company itself, can you explain what they did?
Yeah.
So, and then how that impacted
Yeah.
the treasury? So make it a bit more granular for us.
Yeah. So they manufacture really tanks and systems involved in storing or moving gas as a liquid. When you see the air gas trucks or the Praxair trucks or the storage tanks, right? Chart manufactured those. Or if we want to talk about the liquid tanks for oxygen that people have for when they've got COPD and things like that. Or even as we moved into the beer making and things like that, the tanks for the gas there, they started getting involved in. And while I was there, the big thing was they were starting to get big into the LNG fueling systems. So this was before really, was it going to be LNG? Was it going to be CNG? What was going to be the main alternative fueling source? Because at the time when I started there, oil prices were so high. People were looking for alternative fueling sources. And so those LNG, whether it was like a facility, a place to fuel up, LNG fuel, where people going to start converting tanks to run on LNG, that became a big thing. And that became a very exciting part of the business. So I'd say the biomedical side, the respiratory tanks and things like that was stuff people were always going to need. And that was our cash cow. But the other businesses were where we were profitable, but it took a lot of cash to invest. It took a lot of working capital. They were long-term projects. So a lot of progress payments on the treasury side, letters of credit to back those up. Because we were growing internationally, we had this really strange issue that very few companies have, where we were growing in China, but it had been a lot of investment into China. So we actually were trying to figure out how to get money into China, not get it out. We were trying to figure out what was the right capital structure, because that we needed so much investment there. Yeah. So I was going there routinely to meet with the local banks, to meet with SAFE, which is the organization that involves foreign investment, that runs foreign investment in the country, working with our local teams, because working capital was a big thing, and how to manage all the inventory that was needed to get that business up and running.
And if you're a treasury professional and facing a similar issue, how would you recommend people deal with it?
For me, the biggest thing was connecting with the CFOs that were running those businesses. Really, you have to learn the business. No one coming out of finance knows how cryogenic tanks work, right? We don't understand the manufacturing cycle, the business cycle. When we had an engineer as our CEO, right? Because it's such a technical business. It's not like when I was at Abercrombie, we were selling clothes, right? That was easy. But this is really technical. So you got to learn the business. You got to understand that. And then you really do have to go to those manufacturing facilities, and you have to have relationships with, whether it's the local controller, the local finance person. Even for me in China, it was the head of the business there and the local finance team there, because you've got to really understand what's happening, because you can't make decisions on the right capital structure if you don't understand how the business runs and what the needs are. Because if you don't do things that match the speed of business and the needs of business, right, you're not really helping that organization. If you're just going with what you've always done and assuming it's going to cut and paste for every organization you're at, that's not going to work. And then people aren't going to want to work with you.
And focusing more on you as a treasury professional, how
Yeah.
do you then grow? Because then you went from treasury manager up to treasurer. Talk us through that growth, if you like, or was it just taking more responsibility or developing the responsibility of treasury, spreading the word of treasury within the group? Because you were there for a number of years. So talk us through that for, again, if someone's listening today and they're going,
Yeah.
how do you grow that? I'm just treasury manager, but they could see they maybe have the opportunity to step up.
Yeah, I think the first thing for me, as I mentioned, that my boss, the treasurer, was also the head of M&A, and he wasn't in treasury by growth. It was just, he was a great leader, and
Yeah.
they needed someone to lead treasury. And so he was that person. And I learned a lot from him on management style. And there was a decision where he was leaving the organization, and the CFO was also fantastic. And I can't say enough about him. And when the treasurer, he and I talked, and he said, Steph, I don't think you're quite ready to be treasurer. I think you're absolutely ready to be the assistant treasurer, and I see potential in you. So here's what we're going to do. As the CFO, I'm going to take the treasurer title. We're going to make you the assistant treasurer, and we're going to work on those skills that we want to see in you to be the treasurer. And I went to grad school. I got my MBA. I did a lot more working with cross functions in the organization to make sure that cross-functionally we were adding value. I really worked at becoming more visible with the leadership team and knowing more people in those leadership roles. And I also, as part of that title of assistant treasurer and working for the CFO, I was also brought on to be part of the executive committee. And that gave me a chance to really get to know the CEO, to know the head of HR, and to know some of the people that I didn't necessarily work with normally on a day-to-day basis. And that really allowed me to find where treasury could add value. And it also allowed me to raise my hand for things that maybe weren't necessarily in treasury. So while working capital is certainly a treasury thing, there are things like what are we doing from an AR perspective and a sales perspective? Are there things we can do to help the team? And what we came up with was a lot of our customers were new companies that couldn't get financing. And Charter had a very strong balance sheet. So we worked with a bank to come up with a program where they would lease this really big equipment of ours to our customers based upon the strength of Chart. And so we were able to grow sales through using our balance sheet and supporting our customers. And with doing things like that's where people started to say, okay, right? Like she's ready. She's ready to move into this role because it's manufacturing too. So we're in a lot of other females sitting at the table. So you maybe had to dig a little deeper, work a little harder, prove yourself a little more.
And so it was 2011. I want to bring us today in a minute, but when somebody else is in a similar situation now that you're saying, I want the treasurer role, and they go,
yes,
the CFO says, yeah, I appreciate that, but you're not ready. You're like, you can take it as a knockback or you can take it. So how did you deal with it? And did you just go, right, no, I'm going to go for this? Or how did you deal with that? I know it's a while ago, but again, for the listeners today.
Yeah, I think for me, that would have been a two-step jump for me. So I think one thing is you have to be realistic, right? In our careers, there's things that I remember when I first interviewed for Electrolux, I was 23 years old, and the CFO at the time asked me where I wanted to be in 5 years. And I said, I want to be the CFO. And he and I talked about that later. And it's so naive to think you'll be the CFO in 5 years, but he loved that drive and that focus. And he said, I knew at the time you weren't going to be there, but I also knew you were going to work really hard to try to get there. And I think as long as you're always carrying that mindset, you may not be always able to get what you want when you want it, but you have to keep working towards it. And especially that CFO didn't cut off the path to me, right? He didn't say, you're not ready. And so I'm hiring this person from on the outside. Now you're stuck, right? He gave me a path and he was willing to invest in me because they covered my MBA, right? So they were investing in me. So that was a really easy conversation. I think the real question is, as long as they're giving you that path,
that's your chance to shine. No one's told you yet. They've just said not yet. And then they were really good to me when I got there to make sure that comp wise and benefits wise, I was in the right place.
So it wasn't a not ever, it was a not.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you have to focus on that. Now, if you're told no, and then they put somebody over you, that's a different conversation. And I would have reacted a lot differently.
That's the time to call me. So
Exactly. So I think that's what you have to step back and say, what are they really telling me?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's great. Okay. And so I want to keep moving because you got some other great value and we would talk about this. So then the next move, a natural move from cryogenic equipment and everything else to a global retailer. So talk us through that.
Yeah, that was a weird move. So Chart, I talked about how they were doing so well because of the alternative fuel. And then around 20, the price of oil started to drop. And all of a sudden, people weren't looking at alternative fueling sources. And so Chart made the decision to merge tax and treasury. And I found myself looking for a new role. And I also found out that I was expecting. And I was trying to stay in the Cleveland area, which is where I lived, which was the time was mostly manufacturing. And I was very open about my personal situation. And I to be honest, I struggled to find a manufacturing facility. And this wasn't even that long ago. It was 2016. But man, is the world different 8 years later that were open to my situation. But Abercrombie was, of course, we can't wait to have you. You'll get maternity leave. You'll get all these things. And that was when I was already 4 months pregnant. And they were so great. And I took a look at it and I said, this is an assistant treasurer role. It's a much larger organization and it's retail, which I've never done before.
And this is,
and I said,
so again, for the audience, if you're not looking at Stephanie's profile, it's Abercrombie and Fitch.
Yes.
What was the size of Abercrombie? So this was 2016.
Yeah, they're about 4 billion at the time.
Yeah.
Now, oh my gosh, it's so amazing, their story right now. But I thought this is right. And I'm going to do this. And so my husband and I chose to move back to Columbus, which is where I'm originally from, and do the Abercrombie job. And I learned so much and it was great because really it helped set me up for the future because I didn't know a lot about e-commerce.
Yeah.
And that everybody's e-com now, right? And I was kind of a gap. Chart had a little bit of that, but it was so small. So that really set me up. I learned so much about e-commerce there, so much about how retail works. They were much more flush with cash. So Treasury had a very different role there until COVID hit, right? And when COVID hit, all of a sudden we became very important. But before that, it was really trying to keep that international organization flowing. We did some redesign on the structure internationally. We had relied on, especially in Asia, non-treasury people to run treasury there, which I didn't love. So we reorged that a little bit to really have a global treasury organization that all worked cohesive and really had to focus on, especially once COVID hit. And I'll never forget that day getting a call on a Saturday morning saying, Steph, we need you to come in. We need to think through what happens if we close all of our stores. And coming in with a few members of my team and getting the Europe team on the phone and waking up the Asia team and saying, okay, guys, we got to think through this. If we close stores, can e-commerce carry us? What's in the coffers? What's undrawn on our revolver? How can we manage through this? And all of a sudden we became a pretty well-oiled machine while we always had forecasting. It didn't have to be as tight because we were so cash rich, but that we had to really tighten then. And it was so cool to see the whole team just pivot and really tighten things up. And we got so good at it so quickly. And I was so proud of the team and how strong they became in the really strange world because a lot of our folks in Europe were in Milan, Italy, which, if you might remember, was where kind of the first
really hit
in the West. And so we had people there that weren't even allowed to leave their apartments. They were totally
and the people singing by the balconies. And it's crazy how it's in recent memory, but it now seems we've just moved on. And,
it's 4 years ago. Yeah.
I was actually listening to a podcast with Anne Malum, she was Solid Core, who did Pilates, and they were talking about exactly that moment where she just walked in the office and went, we were in-person Pilates classes and everything else, and then shut us down sort of thing. So it was, what's the word? Just very surreal sort of thing.
Yes.
In that way. So,
yes.
Okay. So you went through that. Talk us through then coming through post-COVID and then bring us more up to date if you would. So what happened?
Yeah. So post-COVID was, I think Abercrombie, just like every organization, was trying to figure out what the new normal would be and how would things be. Because, we had that, some companies have this awkward situation where you have store employees that have to be in, and you have DC employees that have to be in, right, and not working from home. And so what do you do with this corporate office? And big thing about Abercrombie and Fitch is they have this beautiful campus where people work. And it was such a big part of the culture of that organization, right? It's literally like a college campus. You have, in the summer, people are going around on scooters, and you have buildings that you have to travel to for meetings. And it's such an amazing, really, campus. And so working through that and trying to figure that out. And then with my teams too, right? Because everything was different, whether we still had some people in China that were working through that. I mentioned Europe and then the US. So we figured that out, and I felt good about where we had landed. And it was nice that Treasury was back in the thick of things, right? With cash still being a priority. But in the grand scheme of things, when you compare a PE firm, a manufacturing firm, and a clothing retailer, Treasury probably had the less exciting work at a cash-rich retailer. And so when the opportunity at Orveon came around to start a carve-out, be the treasurer, and really get this business established and running and create something new, wow, is that exciting. And again, it was going to be something where working capital was going to be a huge focus. International, which has always been something I've done. And it's always been important to me to be part of an international group. And again, starting at the beginning, right? And getting a chance to grow something. And I was and to be honest, when I met the CFO, she is one of the most glorious people I've ever met. And what I've really learned through my career is who you work for is so critical. And to know that I'd be working for someone like her, it was just, to me, it was a slam dunk. It was just a really easy decision to make.
And talk us through the group, if you would, because we can read some stuff.
Yeah.
I know we can't go into confidential information because you're owned by Advent. Talk us through, but what can you tell us?
Yeah. So it was a carve out. So these brands were owned by Shiseido, which is a very large conglomerate, international Japanese owned company. And so the business case was these three brands might do better if they were more focused on, right? And so the decision was made for Advent to purchase them, but it was a carve out. So you get nothing. You get these three really well-known brands that have this great international reach, but you have no structure, right? Nothing to go with it. So we worked with Shiseido for about a year transitioning. So a lot of working through as we put up our own ERP system, put up our own distribution centers and models, and figured out what our supply chain was going to look like. So it was really, we talk a lot about flying the plane while you're building it, because you still had to keep, right, this $300 to $400 million sales organization, international, going while you're trying to build the company structure that didn't exist anymore. You were borrowing it from somebody else, but we can all imagine how ideal that is. And so having to put that together. And there was a thought that maybe you could do a lot of that with consultants, which made it, in my opinion, maybe a little tougher. So it's been a heck of a 2 years, but man, you don't get this experience from anywhere else, right? The thing that you have to somewhat get comfortable with in your career is the harder you work, the more you're learning. And as long as it's the right work, as long as it's not busy work. But if you're really working towards something, you're gonna bust. But man, are you learning a ton? And the amount that I've done in 2 years at Orveon is probably more than I did at 6 years at Abercrombie, just because there's so much to do and so few resources. And it's also fun because it's your baby now. Yeah. You're not just continuing to row the boat in the same direction it's been heading.
And when you're doing that, when you're establishing these operations and you're putting in place all these policies, controls, procedures, and things, dealing with a couple of clients at the moment, we're recruiting for them. And The question I got asked by one of the candidates, they said, so tell me about the current setup. And I said, you've got your piece of paper and your pen. They went, yeah. I said, you're going to take some notes from me, right? I said, yeah. And they went, yeah. I said, that's the setup currently. They went,
Yeah.
oh,
yeah.
I said, now you can either see that blank sheet of paper as, oh my goodness. Now they have got controls. They are putting in from a global level, but I said, but from an international level across Europe and things. And I said, you've got that blank sheet, but I said, that's for you to write on. And they were like,
yes.
Oh, wow. And either people see that as, oh, goodness, or, oh, great. So you see that, yeah. And so when you're doing that, and again, way back when I had a couple of Treasury folks in the UK and Europe, they were setting up the Treasury functions and they'd gone back over some of my previous podcasts and they'd gone through a bit of a checklist. So if you, as the treasurer, you walked in the door, you're an experienced treasurer, you knew what you were doing. What was your top of your pick list, if you like, again, if someone else is in a similar situation?
Yeah. So the first thing I wanted to get a hold on was cash, right? And that has to be our first responsibility. If there's nothing else you do in Treasury, you make sure that you have the cash you need, you have the visibility to the cash, and you have a feel of what's happening. So that to me was priority number one. How are we managing and forecasting cash? So that was the first thing I did. Was we're somewhat lucky and we only use one bank. And we're able to do that internationally right now. So that made my job a lot easier from a reporting and an information perspective. So that was number one, is what do I have visibility into? Am I able to forecast? And also, what is leadership and what is Advent, the PE firm, looking for? Because you got to keep your stakeholders happy and comfortable. So that, to me, that was phase one, was just getting all of that together. Do we have the right signers? Do we have the right, can we work? Can we do the things we need to do? Can we pay our bills? Can our customers pay us? Are those basics in place?
Yeah.
And if the basics are in place, then it's, okay, what's, for me, because I came in not quite day one. So there are always some things going. We had already selected who our ERP, what the ERP was going to be. Okay, what can I learn about that? What's in there? What's not in there? What do we need to plan for? Okay, we're not public and there's no reason. We don't have a ton of FX exposure. And honestly, cash flow is such a big thing. Hedging, okay, that's not something I have to worry about. So I'm going to just put that out of the way and not even think about that right now. And then it was capital structure. And it was talking to Advent about what they wanted to do, how they saw the capital structure of the organization. And they wanted to put debt in. So it was, okay, let's work together. Let's get that done. So that was really hot and heavy right away because they wanted to do an asset-based loan. That is not simple from a Treasury perspective, reporting perspective. There's a lot of work that comes to that, even before you put the loan in place and then going forward. So how do we do that if we're going to do something like that, right? Because you can't put a loan like that in place and then not be able to provide the information to the lender that's needed after you close. So those to me were the first things. And I know it's frightening because I never said controls, policies, but to be honest, those had to come along with things, right? Those had to happen as we could because we didn't have a lot of people and we had so much to do. And so you try to sneak those things in.
Yeah. But you were doing that when you're looking at the cash management and everything
else. Yeah,
you're
doing it as you go, but
you're doing a compliant way anyway. It's not like
exactly. But it wasn't like, okay, today we're going to work on all of our policies. And it just, that's something that you're doing that as you can and as you go, because at the time it was just me. And so you can't sit there and daydream. You've got to go.
Yeah.
You got to roll up your sleeves and you got to go.
Hello, lovely podcast listener. Sorry to interrupt today's episode, but it's worth it. This is your secret extra discount code that will save you even more on the upcoming Eurofinance conference. That's right. You can save even more by being a podcast listener. Thank you for listening. So for LinkedIn audience members, we gave them a 10% discount, but that's okay. But you're special. You are a regular podcast listener. So thank you very much. We love you guys and thank you for all your support. But you also get to save 15%. That's right, 15. So 15% entry to the amazing 33rd Eurofinance International Treasury Management Conference. The code you have to use when booking, and that you just use the same booking link that's in the show notes, but the code you have to use is MKTG, like marketing, without the vowels, MKTG TCC, that's Treasury Career Corner. TCC, that's what you're listening to. Thank you. So mktg/TCC15. I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but it's worth it. 15% saved just for listening to today's podcast. Thank you very much. Thank you for being a loyal listener to the podcast. And anyway, as I say, let's get back on with the show. Many thanks. You and I had this conversation before about, as part of that, and actually as you were establishing Treasury and a real robust Treasury, but you were then integrating with lots of different parts of the business cross-functionally. And I know that's a key thing for you, that getting Treasury out amongst the wider business. How did you do that? Someone says that's all very well for you, Stephanie, but exactly as you just pointed out there, it was only you at the beginning. But so how did you get out there and spread the word of Treasury?
I think the first thing is the CFO agreed with that. And so she would meet with various people and she would tell people, you need to meet Stephanie. So she had me meet with the CEO early on. She had me present to our executive committee early on. She had me doing one-on-ones with a lot of those people early on. So they all knew who I was. So that later on, when I would say, go to our supply chain leader and say, hey, what's the plan for manufacturing once we're no longer using Shiseido? I need to understand that from a cash flow perspective. It wasn't just me randomly cold calling him. So I think it's important to make sure that you and the CFO are on the same page on how important it is. And if it's not, you got to work that first, right? Because if you don't have that support system, right, everybody's flying by the seat of their pants in a startup situation. So nobody wants to take meetings they don't think are value added. So you've got to make sure that everybody understands the value of Treasury and what we're trying to do. And especially in a PE firm, cash is king. P&L is nice and we report on it, but cash is king. And so making sure everybody understood, I'm not just trying to get in your business. I'm trying to learn what I need to make sure that we have the money you need to do what you want to do. And so it's make sure everybody's clear on the symbiotic relationship that everyone can have in those ways. And then it's continuing to keep those relationships and keep those up, whether it's, I'm not a big fan of meetings for meetings, but sometimes those just bi-weekly touch bases can be, you can set it up for a half an hour, and maybe it's only 5 minutes some weeks, but it's, hey, what's going on in your world? Anything I should know about? Anything changing? Hey, let me tell you what I'm seeing. So it's not just a one-way conversation. Let me share with you what I'm seeing in the world. Because I think what gets lost sometimes in corporations is that everybody focuses on what they need to do, and from their perspective, what's right for the organization. But usually what's really good for the organization is when you get multiple teams together, thinking through everyone's aspect. And then it's usually something that's a mix of what everybody wanted to do. Because everyone's got a different mindset and a different focus. And if it's only Treasury making the decision, or if it's only marketing making the decision, it's probably not the right decision for the company as a whole. It's probably somewhere in the middle. Yeah. And the more we collaborate and the more we get together cross-functionally, the better I think the business performs. And sometimes that's really easy to lose sight of.
Yeah, but I think you explained it very well there. And the other great passion is for helping people grow and develop their Treasury careers. I know you explained it because you're an example of it, but for you as a treasurer now, you're at the top table of the Treasury. How do you encourage that? What's your ethos behind it?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing is I completely trust the people that work for me. And if I don't completely trust you, then you're probably not going to work for me very long. Because what I want is someone that I'm never going to ask you, what hours did you work? I'd be like, I can't stand that micromanagement business. And I also want to know, okay, you got this. You're going to take this. You're going to run with this. And if you have a question, you're going to come back to me. And so any touch bases I have with people is more, to me, sharing information, not just telling them what you've done, right? I believe that you've done what you said you're going to do. And I think the more we do that with people, the stronger the people below us are going to be because they're empowered. And I think that's so critical. And then it's also making sure that you bring them into things so that they're learning and they're growing without adding just 100 meetings to somebody's day, right? Because that's not helpful either. So it's trying to find that balance. But I think if we're not growing and developing the people below us, I think it's so important to say, oh no, don't worry. I've got Melissa right behind me and she's ready to go. She's ready to rock. So I think they'll get so caught up and worried about someone below them taking their jobs. No, this is your
to me, this is the key to moving up in the world, is building a strong team. And then not only that, people are happy and they're enjoying their jobs, and you're not constantly having turnover where you're having to spend time and energy training new people. People are engaged. People are liking what they're doing. And that is the side that I love about work. I was very much a recipient of that in my career coming up. And I noticed it gravely when it was missing and the impact it had on the roles that I was in when it was missing. And so that has even more solidified my need for being that kind of boss and mentor and manager, whatever word you want to use.
And you're a very busy lady. So what we're going to do is we're going to put your LinkedIn details in the show notes. Great conversation so far, but this is our wrap up each week. So what are the takeaways you're going to give? It was great talking there just about cross-functional, growing your career. But if you're thinking at different levels, or what are the takeaways you're going to give to people today?
I think one to me is always be willing to raise your hand, whether it's for a Treasury project or something else, because every experience is fantastic, and getting new experiences is what makes our jobs interesting and exciting. So always willing to raise your hand. Be the kind of person you'd want to work with. So thinking about how you treat the other people you work with, whether they're your superiors or the people that work for you or you work with, be someone that you'd want to work with. And lastly, I think just go for it. If there's something that you want, if there's something you want to do, go for it. Be willing to ask the questions, be willing to ask for help, be willing to work hard, but just go for it.
So put your hand up, treat others as you would like to be treated, as you say, and go for it. Why not?
Yeah.
Look, it's definitely amazing chat. Thank you very much today.
Thank you.
And look forward to catching up and connecting with you very soon.
Thank you for having me. This was really fun.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thanks for tuning in to another great episode. You really enjoy it. Thank you very much. You make it worthwhile. Us recording them with these amazing Treasury professionals right the way across the world, from the US, across the UK, across Europe. And there's lots more exciting guests to come and lots more live events. We love delivering this content. We get asked now, is this what you do? Do you just do content? Do you just do? No. The reason we do the content is to get to know you guys, to give you back the tips for success, if you like. But we're here to help you hire someone. If you need to recruit, call us, because at our heart, we are a Treasury recruitment company. That's how we pay the bills. That's how we pay for the podcast. And that's what we're passionate about. We hear from you at events and things. Can we also help you find your next great role? Can we help you hire? The answer is yes. That's exactly what we do. Yes, we do our Treasury salary survey at treasurysalary.com. That helps us know exactly how to benchmark not only your salary, but also when you're looking to hire, we know exactly what the market is paying wherever you might be, whether it's the US, UK, or Europe. We want to make sure that we are the best informed, that we're not just finger in the air. We always know. If you want to hire the best in Treasury, don't hesitate to contact us. Go onto the website, treasuryrecruitment.com, or for the US, you can contact Joe Grabowski. Europe, contact the lovely Katie. For more senior roles and roles across the UK, reach out and contact me, or drop any of us an email, joe at treasuryrecruitment.com, Katie at treasuryrecruitment.com, or Mike at treasuryrecruitment.com. Let us help you make the hiring process as amazingly seamless and easy as our podcasts are to listen to. Thanks for your amazing support, and looking forward to seeing you at either an event or a conference very soon, or just give me a call. Let's help you find the next role or recruit the next Treasury professional. All right. Until next week. Many thanks.